I was thinking out loud a little bit today and realizing some stuff that I wrote down, and I wanted to share it. So if I sound a little robotic, that's why. It's because I'm reading off this message that I wrote down. People talk a lot about generational trauma and breaking cycles, and while these things are important to talk about, we should be talking about them. I haven't really seen this approached in like a sense of why break the cycle at all. Aside from people telling you that the cycle is hurting you, it's harming you, it's bad, and breaking it is going to help you, I feel like we're not talking about the big picture. Like, while all of these points are true, we're not understanding this process beyond the fear of the cycle. We want to get rid of it because it's bad and harmful, and that's objectively fine. But I think to truly immerse yourself in something, you have to understand it beyond acting based off of fear. So I want to offer discourse on the bigger picture, starting with why does it happen? Like, why do we get caught in these generational cycles? And beyond the suffering, why stop it? A lot of people attribute generational cycles to karma, like your ancestors had at some point acquired some bad karma, so it's just passed down generation to generation. And while I don't wholly disagree, I do also think that either that causes you to become resentful of the past, or you turn a blind eye to the ancestral lessons entirely in not wanting to be resentful and remaining respectful. But it's important to remember that karma is meant to teach us a lesson, not to make us suffer. Easier said than done, sure, but allow me to offer you an alternative perspective. Let's say you're a scientist in the Arctic and all signal transmitting and receiving devices have failed to work. This means no internet and no phone services, but of course, naturally, you still need to communicate with the outside world. So you decide to bring back messenger birds. But these birds will need to survive the cold, harsh climate of the Arctic. And let's say, for the sake of this example, you are blessed with a lifespan well beyond an average human's. Like, I'm talking thousands of years, because you will need to use these thousands of years to expose a species of bird slowly to the Arctic climate until that species naturally evolves to develop a resilience to the cold. Generations and generations of this bird species will have to consistently be exposed to the Arctic in order for this resilience to develop. But once these birds do develop this resilience to the cold, there's no need to expose them to it anymore. There's no more exposure, no more training or lessons because the resilience has been built. The goal has been met. These birds have immunity now and can venture forth. In the simplest terms, breaking the cycle is to stop the cycle because it's no longer necessary. For example, and similarly, with generational cycles and subsequently generational traumas, there comes a point where there just isn't any need for these lessons to be carried on anymore. Because after developing from generation to generation to generation, the lesson was learned and an understanding was formed. The goal was met. The resilience has been built. It has been coded in the cycle breaker's DNA, much like the cold resilience was eventually coded into the Arctic messenger bird's DNA. It's only a cycle until that genetic code pops up in the DNA to show that the evolution is complete. The cycle can now stop. You aren't a cycle breaker because someone in the ethers wants to dump this on you. You are the cycle breaker because you carry the evolved code. You are what the scientist has been looking for over those thousands of years. You have the resilience to venture forth. You are the beginning of a new cycle. But for a new cycle to begin, the old one must be sealed off. Because as much as these developments are for the greater good, yours included, the trials for development aren't easy. Many, many generations have likely suffered in trying to evolve to acquire this lesson, the genetic code, if you will. And there's no need for succeeding generations to needlessly struggle as well. Once again, the goal has been met. The one with the code, also now known as the cycle breaker, has been created. So now it's up to the cycle breaker to turn around and seal off the cycle. And why is that the cycle breaker's job? Why is it your job? Because you are the only one strong enough to stand against the waves that have swept others away. You are the only one who can. And this is where things become personally difficult, because standing against waves of any sort isn't easy. That is to say, your family won't understand what you're doing. Much like predecessing birds around the evolved bird may not understand why so willing to fly out into the cold. They can't see your coding. Out of fear, they may try and stop you and get you to do things how they've always been done, naming tradition and customs as the reason. But those are just shields to hide the fear. They worry you will suffer like they did. And because it's ancestral, this fear will be deep rooted, causing them to act out in anger and desperation. They may try and do everything in their power to stop you from flying, even if it means oppressing and silencing you. After all, deep-seated fears can turn a loving pet into a wild animal who will draw blood in exchange for safety. And this is the next difficult part, believing in yourself and going against the grain, even if it means you have to butt heads. Keep pushing back. In doing so, you're essentially cauterizing the ancestral wound, preventing yourself and the others who will come after you from suffering. You are saying, "We will bleed out no more." The sear of heat against a festering wound may be painful, but it will be shorter than letting that infected wound get worse over time. More importantly, it will allow for healing. That wound has been left unattended for too long. Now is the time to break the cycle, not just to stop the pain and start the healing, but simply because it's the right time and you are the right person.